TSN Studios located in the mountain region of western North Carolina. You are listening to the Ourlads Football Radio Network.
All right, it's Friday, the 8th of September, 2017. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, and we've got ourselves some fantasy football to talk about. Last week, of course, we had an opportunity to preview the season, and we had a lot to talk about on that show as well. So that's available on demand, and all the shows are available on demand, and you can check them out right now in a variety of places. You can go, of course, first and foremost, to Ourlads.com. You can also check out some of the archives over at primesportsnetwork.com. But also there's a YouTube page that is under Prime Sports Network. There's an iTunes page that's under Prime Sports Network. And Prime Sports Network, of course, is the production company for Ourlads and all the Ourlads shows, including this one here on our fantasy coverage. So, and by the way, coming up a little bit later on at 4 o'clock today will be more pro and college football talk with Dan Shonka, GM and National Scout from Ourlads. Also, Ken Marangolo makes a return to talk NFC East football. Two big NFC East games to discuss. So Ken Marangolo, the managing editor for hogshaven.com, will join me. And we also have a guest, a special guest who covers Maryland Terrapins football. And this will give us an opportunity to find out what's going on there after the big win. DJ Durkin, the former Michigan assistant coach, the big win over Texas. Unfortunately, they lose their quarterback. So they have a pretty weak opponent this week to get ready for some more tough competition after that. But that's coming up later on, starting at 4 o'clock, pro and college football talk. Let's welcome in my first guest and co-host, actually. He'll be here all throughout the season. You can find his content, of course, at Ourlads.com. Chief Fantasy Analyst for the website at Ourlads.com, Jamal Murphy. How you doing, Jamal?
Pretty good, a little low on sleep. Had a nice little game last night, first game of the NFL season, but, so I'm in a good mood. Can't complain.
All right. Well, good for you. I mean, as I told you off the air, I haven't been able to watch the game. I got no idea what the results of the game. People who have listened to me for years know my system. They know that the DVR is my prized possession. I can't do anything without it. Because when I'm busy, because I can't get certain games. I haven't been able to watch any of the tennis from last night, so I have no idea. And I'm the type of person that I cannot know the result before I watch it, because if I do, then it's just, I kind of just want to just fast forward throughout the whole thing because I just don't really care. I have to care when I watch games and sporting events because I watch a million of them a year, and if I know the results of these games, then I just, it doesn't matter. And I kind of want a little bit of a drama in my life. I'm a sad guy. I don't have the family that you have. I'm not in. What did you say? You said that Dan is in where? Was he in Jerusalem? Did you say that?
So.
I was in Jerusalem yesterday. I'm now a little bit further north, but I am still in the land of milk and honey, as it were, Israel.
That's awesome.
I
no
like
wonder
that.
why you were. No wonder why you were 10 minutes late for the show. We were supposed to do our pre-show stuff, and Dan was nowhere to be forgiven.
He was in the Holy Land.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
That's
I
a good
apologize
excuse.
for that, guys.
You're forgiven. That's a good excuse. That's what we're supposed to do. Forgive, right?
That's true. That is what they teach us in the Holy Book, which I believe was penned in my current location.
Okay. All right. So, by the way, Dan, did you come up with a better title this week?
No, I'm still, now I'm starting to feel like, well, the season already started. Is it bad luck to switch it? I might have to wait and see if I, well, look, like you said, we have to enjoy these things. So am I in general a superstitious person? No. But with fantasy football, I guess I let the superstition creep a little bit just to sort of up the ante of the excitement of the whole thing. So yeah, right. I'm gonna wait and see if I start winning or not. And if I go on a cold streak, I always have the name change to go.
Okay.
To.
So
yeah, if there's nothing on the waiver wire, at least I can change my name.
All right. So for now, we'll just stick with sports producer and fantasy expert. That'll work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we were talking about my title. I thought we were talking about Odell Loves Lena.
Well, that works too.
My team title.
Well, that can apply. You can get rid of that as well.
I'm gonna look for new titles for both for next week. How about that?
I'll wait for whatever you want to do. We're here to please. Okay. So
But just to check, Greg, before we start, we are in a no spoiler zone.
Yes, we are. For
Game,
tennis and for football.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow, both?
All right.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I did try to catch up for a little bit on tennis. I'm in the third set of the first match, and that's it. So, so I've got a lot of, well, you know, I got to try to.
That was a great third set, by the way.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it. So, yeah.
Yeah. In both cases, I'd say you have some great sports watching ahead of you.
Awesome.
And I'll leave it at that.
Looking for great. Excellent. So, and then, of course, we got a big day, of course, Saturday in college football. And then most importantly for this show, Sunday in the NFL, and also the couple of games on Monday night. And, you know, boy, you guys, well, you're of course in a different country, Dan, but Jamal, I mean, you being up in New York, I'm a little bit more north, but I mean, that's the other thing, even though life is more important than fantasy football or sports, but just imagine you've waited all season. You waited for your team to play. Let's say you're a Dolphin fan, Buck fan. You've waited for your first game of the season. You're psyched up. You're ready to go. You're a fantasy. You're trying to, and all of a sudden, like, your fantasy draft is canceled. Your team is delayed till next week. I mean, and then all of a sudden you got to sit in a storm and hope that you don't have electric out for like a month and your life isn't turned over. But that's we hope everybody the very best down in South Florida and in the Florida and the Southeast and maybe even the Southwest now. So.
Yeah, no question about it. Good luck to everybody.
Yeah. I wanted to say the disclaimer that, of course, you know, this is fantasy football. Ultimately, is a game, and we care about people's health and safety much more than we do about our fantasy outcomes. But I'm only making that disclaimer because I am going to lament about the teams that I drafted Jay Ajayi or Mike Evans, and I don't get my first round pick. Yeah. Now, obviously, that's not a bigger deal than what's happening in the real world, but we're just going to suspend that for this pod, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you take again, you know, if again, you're talking about. So you drafted Ajayi in a different league, then?
Yeah. I'm one league. I had Ajayi with my first round pick. Another league, I had Evans with my first round pick.
Who did you switch him to?
I think those are the only two I'm greatly affected by. Although I do have Jarvis Landry in our league, and he was a starter. So you know, a lot of ripple effects from this game. There's definitely a lot of key. I mean, there's a lot of key fantasy players on both sides of the ball as far as Tampa Bay, Miami goes.
And who did you switch your those play? Have you made those decisions yet on those leagues of who switched out?
Yeah. Actually, funny enough, the Jay Ajayi league, I switched in Mike Gillislee. I guess I can't really tell you how that worked out.
No,
but
you can't.
Those of you listening know. And in my league where I had Mike Evans, I actually switched in Martavis Bryant, who I know you have in our league.
Okay.
Feeling pretty good about that. I'd rather have Mike Evans.
Sure, of course,
obviously.
Yeah.
But it all goes back. I draft as if I'm going to playing my bench. I don't pick guys for my bench like, you know, none of our league is not a dynasty league, so we're really just worrying about this year. So, you know, the way I've never had a team where I didn't have to start guys on my bench, and I'm not just talking about on bye weeks. You know, things happen. Yeah. Guys get injured, game might get postponed. So you should always have a bench that you're comfortable plugging in, because it will happen.
No, absolutely. I mean, your bench is just as big as, you know, when people are talking about any draft, it's important to get those guys in the later rounds. And those guys sometimes are even more important because they're going to have to play and they're going to be contributors. And, you're going to have injuries. And it's not just the bye weeks. You are going to have injuries, and you better have a good bench or else you're going to have to make trades. So, all right. Well, let's take a look first of all. Then, Jamal, has it affected you? Anything that happened, or can you say whether or not, you know, which particular players were affected the most from this cancellation, from this canceled game?
Yeah, I mean, in our league, it definitely didn't affect me at all. You know, I had the foresight to stay away from teams in hurricane areas.
All right, that's important.
So I did that, and so I'm pretty good in our league. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the game in general, I mean, obviously it's going to affect people who took Ajayi. Most people who did take Ajayi took him in the first round. Jameis Winston, you know, probably a mid-round pick. Most people are starting him if they have him in a league. Jameis Winston. Sleepers like Jacquizz Rodgers is affected. You have to go a different direction there, and obviously Mike Evans, Landry. So yeah, I mean, both of those teams had a bunch of guys on fantasy rosters, unlike my New York Jets, when I was going over my picks of players, I couldn't find any Jets to put anywhere hardly, but that's another story.
Okay.
But yeah, so that game, is going to have a big effect.
All right. Well, and then the buys too. Does it affect the buys at all, Dan? What do you think? I mean, anything at all? Because
first of all, I also want to throw in there are a few other guys that I think are probably hurting people. Deshaun Jackson is owned in almost every league, and a lot of people really high on Devontae Parker because of what the chemistry he showed with Cutler in the preseason, where by the end of drafts, he was actually going higher than Landry, which personally I think is kind of crazy because I think Landry's a model of consistency. But a lot of people were counting on him. Now, I also think the Jacquizz Rodgers thing is really interesting because most people who were planning to start Jacquizz Rodgers, they're doing it because they don't have any other options. They're waiting on Zeke. They're waiting on Doug Martin, guys coming off of suspension. And they purposely drafted Quiz thinking that he would be perfect for them for the first couple weeks. So my bet is a lot of Jacquizz Rodgers owners are scrambling.
Well, is that his nickname, Quiz? I've never heard that before.
Yeah, well, that's I hang out with a lot of
ingenious
pro players. I'm sort of like The Rock and Ballers. So
true.
I know some of their nicknames.
All right. So let's take a look at our teams. And first of all, we're playing each other, Jamal. We didn't get an opportunity to talk about that last week. You were on that vacation. And let's see.
And an interesting thing about that, I mean, no spoilers. I get it, but you had somebody in that game, so you didn't check the points.
Oh no, I didn't.
Okay, so stay away from that. Don't check your team.
All right, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right, because it is listed on here. But yeah, when I take a look at your team, and you do have Bilal Powell. So now I will say this. I don't know what you guys think, but especially because you're in other leagues. But let's just in our league together, I generally do never look at the other players' until 4:00 on Sunday. And there's two reasons for me for that. One, because really the main reason, to tell you the truth, is probably has more to do with gambling. Like if I have picks or things like that that I'm interested in, I don't want to have any sort of cross biases or some sort of, I can't root for this team or I can't root for this player to score because he's actually on a team that I'm playing this week, and it's just too intense for my head. So I kind of avoid knowing who those players are, so it's not influencing me while I'm watching it. I just worry about my own players. And then because with the majority of games by the 1:00 hour are over, and you only have 4 or 5 games left the rest of the weekend, and then that's when I go, okay, let me see where I'm at. Let me see what I have left at 4:00 and the primetime games. Let me see what he has left. Let me see what the point totals are. So I don't know about you guys. And you know what? Even if I guess the gambling didn't come into play, I'm sure I do wonder whether. I mean, if I'm you and I had 3 or 4 leagues, I couldn't do it. I couldn't worry about the other guys' teams. It would be incredible. I mean, I don't know how you guys do it, or if you even do it.
Right. No, you're right. I think I'm going to try to adopt your philosophy because I actually do. I do see who's on the other team, and it becomes it's a mess because, like you said, when you're in 4 leagues, 5, whatever you're in, no matter what, somebody scores it probably helps you in a league, probably hurts you in another league. So there's really no point. You're right. You should just sit back and relax and let it all happen.
The way I personally look at it is I'm so committed to – there's rarely a game where I don't have vested interest through fantasy on both sides of the ball because I'm in 6 leagues. I'm in a suicide pool or elimination pool, excuse me. I'm in a pick'em. I'm in a league where you have to pick one quarterback to throw a touchdown each week. That's it. Just pick one quarterback each week to pick a touchdown. So, by the end of all my picks and sitting on my lineups, I got guys everywhere. So I sort of, I root for my Jets, and other than that, I kind of just follow where I need people to score for me. Otherwise, it's all, I'm rooting for both sides most of the time.
Okay, so does that mean that you actually you don't care about you don't want to know what the other players are, or you are? Or
no, I mean the thing is, invariably, I'm going to be playing against a guy that I also have another team.
Sure, yeah.
So this is what, Greg, what really ends up usually happening to me is by Sunday afternoon, once the scores have started to kind of, to decide themselves a bit, and it's down to a couple players. That's when I start really focusing on individual matchups and who I have left for me and who I'm going up against. I barely even pay attention before the games start because it's like it could just go in so many different directions for me usually.
All right. So what do you think? I'm going to give you, since I'm playing Jamal this week, you tell me, what do you think based on what you see? Our matchups, of course, are always important. Do you notice anything where you see there's matchups that might benefit one or the other that would influence you in thinking, you know what, I think maybe I would favor one or the other team this week?
Well, you guys are very close, actually. You're matched up really well. I mean, I think the one big advantage that Jamal has over you is at the tight end position.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But who knows? That's an interesting thing about tight ends. Who knows? Like, Ingram could end up being a favorite target of Manning out in Dallas. And
he
you
will
could easily win that matchup.
He will.
But you guys are so close on running backs and wide receivers that I think I have to give the slight edge to Jamal because of that tight end matchup.
And also Jamal probably has an advantage with the quarterback situation. My quarterback goes up against Seattle. His goes up against Chicago.
Kind of, sort of, Greg. Because A-Rod is obviously the gold standard, but he, and I know he's at home, but he's playing against the Legion of Boom. That's not easy. Whereas,
no, that's why I said he's
Matt
got
Ryan
the advantage.
Is going into Soldier. What's that?
That's why I said he has the advantage.
Oh, but then again, but he's the best player in the game. So, I mean, you can sort of overthink these matchups a little bit sometimes. I mean, if I had my choice.
If you had your choice.
I would rather start Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
If I could have either of your quarterbacks this week, I would take yours, despite the matchup.
Okay.
I'm just saying the matchup kind of makes it almost even.
Okay, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
But
I would agree with that. I mean, whenever you're up against Rodgers,
hold on,
you're worried.
What were you saying, Jamal?
I would agree with that. Whenever you see Rodgers on the other side of your matchup, you're a little worried. He can produce big numbers against anybody, really. He's, a great player. Ryan, I do like his matchup at Chicago. He should put up big numbers, but you just cannot be as confident in him as you are Rodgers.
Now, do you guys think it's an advantage or a disadvantage when, like for you, Jamal, you got Ryan and Freeman every week? So is that something that you actually consciously said, this isn't a bad idea, I think they're going to have a great season, they're going to have a big offense, it doesn't matter, I want these guys, and maybe even it helps to have two key guys on the same team, so I'm watching one game a little bit more instead of going 8 different games at once? Or is it more of a, hey, you know what, I didn't even realize I had them both on the same team?
Yeah, for me it's I didn't even realize it. Once it's done, I think I don't know if it's a plus, really, if it really matters, but it does make it fun on Sundays when they connect. You're getting double the points. You kind of feel, it may not matter, but it feels like it matters. So yeah, I mean, at the time, it's not like I plan on taking a quarterback wide receiver connection or quarterback running back, anything like that. But once it happens, you're right. It does make it easier. Which game you really care about.
Yeah.
Which game you're going to be watching closely, and when they do connect, it's sweet.
Yeah. How do you think about that connection, Dan? The quarterback to receiver connection on the same team. Does that in any way influence you, one way or another?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people definitely espouse the benefits of having that sort of double hit of, when you have Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson, or you have, Drew Brees Drew Brees. I guess it would have been Cooks. Now it's Thomas. I've heard people say they like to go for that because when one of them has a big game, two of them will have the big game, and you're almost guaranteed to win. But like Jamal said, to me, the logic kind of is a little flawed because I feel like you could also get hurt just as badly. I mean, it really depends on the duo. But certainly to go back to something you were talking about before, Greg, it does make it a lot easier as far as who I'm rooting for. If I have Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson both starting, those are probably two of my top 3 or 4 picks. I'm definitely rooting for the Packers. And even if they're playing the Jets, I'm rooting for the Packers in that game,
All right. What about, okay, I'm not sure I like that, but okay. But I get you. You're rooting for a high-scoring game with the Jets coming out on top. That's what you're rooting for, right?
Well, yeah, certainly.
Okay.
Certainly.
All right.
I would always prefer that, but I've been a Jets fan for a long time, Greg, and basically I'm always prepared for the worst.
I hear you. Okay, so let's talk about injuries now. And now, of course, the first thing is not an injury; it's a suspension, and Zeke will play on Sunday night. But is that it? By the way, I haven't heard any updates. Is that it? He plays one game and then he goes on a 6-game suspension.
Well, I think it's still in the courts. I think he's waiting on his decision from the judge. He's basically he put forth an appeal which allows him to play this one game while the appeal is being thought about. And then depending on how it comes down, like if they rule against him, which is probably most likely, then he will have to start serving the 6-game suspension.
Oh, I had thought that they said that already. Why did I miss? Maybe I missed. I heard it wrong.
If I'm not mistaken, what we found out is that he's either going to get it fully taken away. So it's either going to be 0 games or 6 games. There won't be a reduction. And I think most people's opinion are, like Jamal said, it's pretty unlikely that they're going to take away the suspension altogether.
So which story came out a couple of days ago regarding I mean, I taped NFL Live. Again, it's sometimes the only way when I'm busy I can hear about the top stories, and they let off saying, okay, Ezekiel Elliott's suspension's been upheld, and but it's too late now for the first game, so he plays the first game, and then he has to serve his 6 games. That was on First Take. And then all of a sudden, Stephen A. Smith started to talk about he deserves it. It's his own fault. So what's happened the last 2 days to change that? I thought it sounded to me like that's it. He's going to play one game and he's going to sit 6 games.
I mean, it's confusing. Don't get me wrong. Like this whole thing, I had to reread the thing a couple of times. I still don't 100% understand it. But from my understanding is that he appealed to the league, right? He appealed.
And the league upheld
to
it.
The league. So there was an arbitrator, and the arbitrator held in favor of Goodell's suspension.
Got it.
So now he goes to the courts above the league to try to say that, obviously, it's illegal on a real
and they can hold it up
legal basis.
And the courts can hold this up, really?
Yeah, the courts could say Goodell, the NFL doesn't have they're overreaching their power. By doing this to him, and it's a violation of his whatever right.
So this could be in other words, this could be a Brady thing, where he plays this year, starts to serve the suspension next year.
It's possible. That's possible.
Yeah,
but I think they gave him a definite timeline that they're going to hand down a decision. So that's why he gets to play this one game, because they're not going to make the decision until next week.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, he can play this one game.
All right, and
that's also why it's either 6 or nothing, because the courts aren't going to decide the penalty should be. They're not going to reduce the penalty.
Sure.
They either decide this was wrong or this is right.
Okay. All right. Well, that's look, if he doesn't have to serve it this year, he'll serve it next year. There's no way. I mean, he's not going to. You don't get to beat girls and don't get.
I think he's going to serve it, Greg.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, he's going to have to prove to the courts that, or his defense is going to have to prove to the courts that he deserves this, that Roger Goodell is overstepping his boundaries, but it's clearly laid out from the last agreement with the players' union that he has this authority,
got the control.
And that's why Brady and Adrian Peterson couldn't win this fight, and I doubt Ezekiel Elliott will either.
Yeah, it's sort of like in court, if you're if you're accused accused of murder, and there's a thing that a stipulation that gets in the way, and they throw it out for whatever reason. It doesn't mean he's innocent. It just means that something wasn't done properly. In this case, of course, it's just a delay. So again, more than likely, that then benefits a lot of the guys that got lucky and drafted Ezekiel Elliott in the second or third round. So that would be huge for those guys. And we'll find out how it all works out in the next couple of weeks. What about key injuries? Anybody because there are, of course, going to be injuries this week, or even though I think the two major holdouts have no impact, of course, being Dwayne Brown and Aaron Donald, unless you're a Ram defensive guy, which you'd have to be crazy to be, even though they do have a good defense, and Tavon Austin, but still that's not a priority type of defense in special teams. So what about any key injuries or guys who may or may not play that you're going to have to really pay close attention to before Sunday? First, I'll start with you, Jamal. Anybody that you noticed that you think we should keep an eye on?
Well, I think the big one that I can think of is the Seattle situation with Rawls. I think it looks like he's not going to play. I'm not sure if it's official yet, but looks like Rawls isn't going to play, and Eddie Lacy's going to get the bulk of the carries. Interesting, he'll be playing against Green Bay, his former team. So that might be a guy to consider putting in just in terms of motivation. Getting to play against Green Bay and show them, what they gave up on, because it looks like I said, Rawls isn't going to play. And then McCoy. LaShawn McCoy from the Bills, he was questionable. I think they said they're saying he was at practice yesterday, so It looks like a good sign. But when you read some of their beat writers' stuff, they don't really trust it. So it's pretty much it looks like it's a questionable situation. He's officially listed as questionable. It does look like a 60-40 kind of thing that he'll play.
Okay, and Dan, anybody else out there, or also you can throw in any of your tips on how you handle those sort of situations? Do you go down to the actual last minute to wait until, because they don't start these games usually at about 2 or 3 minutes after 1 o'clock, and you get that information sometimes at 12:58 on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you asked that, Greg, because my number one injury concern is Odell Beckham Jr.
True. Yes. And that's a Sunday night game.
That's a Sunday night game. So you basically, we might get some more news Sunday morning, but most likely from everything that we're getting so far, we're not going to hear until we're at the game. Then you're in a situation where you need to have somebody who's either playing in that game or in one of the Monday night games, or else you're going to be empty. So sometimes you just have to play it safe. I still haven't made the decision because obviously I still have a little time. But my instinct is I'm just going to plug someone on the bench because I don't want to risk getting a donut for having him not start or just be a decoy. That's the other thing. He might start and Odell Beckham Jr. would be one of the top 2 or 3 decoys in the history of the NFL. And we've seen that before with players like Megatron, where they were hurt and there was no intention of them ever being thrown to. But the other team's defense has to respect them being on the field. So that's definitely a dicey play, and
but you have to sit him, right? You have to. Yeah, you have to sit him, don't you? If you have no idea, 50-50 either way, you can't take a chance.
Well, I guess playing. I kind of agree with you, Greg, but I guess the other side of the argument would be this is my number one pick. This is a dynamic scorer, and I'm going to kick myself if he scores 30 points on my bench.
Oh, that's true. Isn't that where your bench comes in, though, in those situations where you should have, especially the first week of the season, you should have at least 1 or 2 guys where you go, okay, yeah, that's a starter, and anything else. I mean, the only thing Odell could actually do is have one of those tremendous games. Otherwise, I think I'll be okay with this guy starting.
Yeah, I think your rationale is the way to go, but it definitely, there's a sort of sense of frustration at you don't want to sit your number one pick week 1. It just hurts.
So it's a gut. Is it a gut call too? Or do you basically then usually you personally will side with I'm going to play my star, and if he doesn't play, he doesn't play, and I get screwed, but so be it.
Yeah, I mean, in this instance, I'm going to sit him.
Okay.
Because it's too risky. I basically need at least a little bit more than, it's totally 50-50.
Okay. Jamal,
You know,
what about you?
I watched the preseason game when he got hurt, and I thought to myself, he's going to be out a few weeks.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, but it's definitely I don't know if it's always a gut call. You definitely want to factor in whatever news you have, but it is definitely case by case.
Okay.
And
so you'll change your mind every hour until
Yeah.
Sunday at 1. Okay.
But I'd much rather get 8 points or 12 points from one of my bench guys than 0 points.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I like to play it safe.
Because that's the other thing is, even though you're saying I don't want to not start him, and then I'm going to feel stupid if he scores 30. Then you're also going to have the other thing where you're going to say, hey, I lost this entire week because I started him, he didn't play, and my bench guy who I would have started would have gotten enough points for me to win. So that's that plays into it as well. Jamal, how do you normally do it?
Yeah, I mean it's basically the same situation. I mean it is a conundrum. You know what I'm saying? You want to go with the guy you drafted, the guy who has the huge upside. If you think he'll play, but I do think you're right. The safe bet is to go with your bench, and that's why you put together you try to put together a strong bench, because even if he does play, like Dan said, he could be a decoy. He could re-injure whatever the problem is in the first quarter, second quarter. So the safe bet is to go with a healthy player when it comes to football.
All right. Now, let's move on and talk about players that you've noticed right now, because we just talked about maybe a bench player, so that you may have to think about starting. So are there guys, we call them fringe players, that especially week 1, we've seen the preseason, maybe we're thinking, oh, can he actually do that in the regular season, but you're thinking he's more of a bench guy, and you're going, should I take a chance with him and start him? So are there any guys like that, fringe guys, that may actually percentage-wise be bench players, but your gut tells you, you know what, I think he's worth a start this week? Any of those guys that, first we'll start with you, Dan.
Well, the first guy that jumps out at me is someone that actually Jamal mentioned already, is Eddie Lacy. He'll tell you Jamal always makes fun of me that I love the storyline more than the game. Because whenever you get an instance where a player is coming back or getting their revenge game, whether it's Steve Smith Sr. playing against the Panthers, talking about go back and mow my lawn.
True.
Or I mean, we've seen it time and time again where a guy gets a chance to play his old team and seems to call upon some extra effort. So I'm really curious about that. In fact, I'm in a situation in one of my leagues. I'd love to know what you guys think I should do. I've got Frank Gore and Paul Perkins penciled in as my starters. They're both projected to do better than Eddie Lacy. But I think Eddie Lacy is going to have a huge game. And Frank Gore is playing on the Andrew Luckless Indianapolis Colts. I feel like he's going to be going up against a stacked box the whole time. And, of course, Paul Perkins is a somewhat unproven entity for the Giants.
Yeah.
So which two of those three guys would you guys start? Because the projections are definitely say go Perkins and Gore, but I feel like I have to work Lacy in there.
I would Gore for me out of the picture. I'd go with Lacy over Gore, but it would be a lot tougher for me with Perkins, because he is a player that he's just one of those players we kind of just talked about. But he's not a rookie. We saw a little bit of what he could do at the end of last season. A very good career in college. I know the Giant offensive line isn't any good, but you know what? Neither is Seattle's. And so you do have to think about, is Paul Perkins ready to take that next step? Because I do believe that when most teams play the New York Giants, their main concern is going to be Eli Manning and their passing game. So is Perkins good enough to get 70, 80 yards, maybe score a touchdown, which I think he can, especially in that game. I expect that game to be pretty offensive. As far as the Green Bay game, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a big Eddie Lacy fan to begin with. I don't know. I know he's a little lighter, which he needs to be, because, he was too fat before, and then you throw him into the situation where Seattle, I mean, they can't open any holes. So how's a fat guy going to run through no holes? But he's a little bit lighter. So, and he's got the motivation you talked about. That would be a tough one where, you know what, because I have a little bit of a bias against Lacy, I might go with Perkins, plus the fact, again, like I said, I think Perkins could be a little bit better than we think. What about you, Jamal?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'm kind of leaning towards the Lacey, and I'm going with the storyline, which I try to stay away from. We'll go with it this time. It just works too well. First game of the year against his old team, he's gonna get, he'll probably get 20 plus carries. When he was in decent shape, I don't know if he was ever in great shape. When he was in decent shape, he was a good running back, very impressive running back. The league is full of bounce back stories. I wouldn't be surprised if Lacey can do that for Seattle.
Yeah, so we've been absolutely no help to you by splitting on that on those decisions. Here's the other thing, though. Rawls has not been ruled out, correct?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay,
I don't think he's
so
been officially ruled out.
No, I think it's still a game time.
And
decision.
it's a 4:00 game, even though the Giant game is 8, so that gives you that helps you.
Right.
So if it was the opposite, if the Dallas Giant game happened to be at 1:00, then I don't even think you'd have a decision to make if Rawls wasn't out yet. That would just make it easy for you to go, well, I can't take any chances there, just in case, because you never know. But in that situation, obviously, then it makes it a lot easier. So, but if Rawls isn't out, and you don't know though how many carries he's going to get, I still don't think that you can go with Lacey. That just, to me, that would rule it out.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of also, Greg, you didn't get very detailed, but you were very decisive about not liking Gore this week.
Yeah,
that might. I mean, it's an interesting question when you have a team like the Colts, where they're basically a different team without their quarterback. Do you say, oh, Frank Gore is going to get 30 carries? They can't.
Sure.
Scott Tolzien can't throw the ball. They're going to have to run it.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to get a good day. Or do you say the Rams are going to stack the box and he'll be lucky to break 50 yards?
The other thing is, no Aaron Donald, as we said. That's a huge help for the Colts. But no Ryan Kelly for the Colts, who's one of their top, 2 or 3 linemen at center, important position. Also, we don't know how the Colts are going to now bring in Marlon Mack into the offense, because at some point this season, Mack's going to get more and more touches, and the more and more touches he gets, the fresher Gore will be at this stage of his career. So that's another one of those week 1 things that we just have no idea how the Colts offense is going to run based on the quarterback situation and based on whether or not Max is going to get more touches, because Gore had to be pretty much the whole offense the last couple of years. They didn't have a really good number 2. Now they actually have a number 2.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, Greg, I'm leaning towards your original. I am leaning towards your pick, which is to go Perkins, Lacey, but I think it will ultimately be a game time decision. I want to throw one other player that I'm super curious about based on your original question. That's Kevin White for the Bears. He's sort of the de facto number 1 with Cam Meredith out, and I want to see, is this guy going to actually put up wide receiver 1 numbers? Because I have to start him in my league. Well, that's the problem. Mike Glennon is his is his long distance carrier.
What do you guys think about that when you're thinking about that decision and you say, well, the Bears in Atlanta's clearly better. Atlanta's going to wind up beating them. They're going to beat them maybe pretty bad. If they do that, the Bears have to pass the ball. And if they pass the ball, guys like Kevin White will have more receptions and more stats. How do you guys think about that into the equation when you're doing this each week?
I mean, I always think about that. A team, definitely a team that's going to be outmatched. I think you generally think that would favor your wide receivers, and be kind of lean against the running back. And I think that because especially in a PPR format, even if they get killed, even if Kevin White doesn't score a touchdown, even if he doesn't break 100 yards, he might get to 20 points just by catching 6 or 7 short passes and it'd probably have to be heavily PPR split to get that exact figure. But I'm just saying they don't have to do well. They don't even have to score a lot for a wide receiver to get you a lot of points with a team playing from behind.
Jamal, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's probably something I don't think about enough. Like in that scenario, I'm just so scared of Glennon, and just have no confidence in the passing game. But I'm probably I'm probably not taking into account that, even an average to below average QB, if you give him enough chances, can make something happen, especially if it's garbage time early. So that is definitely something to think about.
Are there any players on your team going into this first game that you feel it was more of a gut? Maybe they didn't have an expected year last year, sort of like we talked about last week with Kelvin Benjamin. A guy like that, where you go, you know what? I know he didn't perform all that well last year, but I kind of think he's going to rebound. And so this becomes a really important first game. Any players like that, like Kelvin Benjamin or Tavis Bryant, who I actually have on the same team in our league, but any guys like that, from that perspective, guys that you're thinking, you know what? I think they are going to rebound, but I'm not quite sure. So this becomes a big start in week one. Dan?
I mean, for me, I would go with a guy I'm actually starting in our league, and I'm actually starting him in place of Jarvis Landry, whose game is obviously postponed. And that would be, oh no, Torrey Smith is on your team, right? I'm sorry, guys. I'm having a brain freeze. Does anybody have my team up right now? Corey Coleman. It was Corey Coleman. Sorry. Corey Coleman from the Browns.
Yeah. Okay.
He started off last year as a rookie with on fire, looking like a definite candidate for Rookie of the Year. He got injured early in the season, and we didn't hear anything else from him. So far in the preseason, he's lighting it up again. The other guy he's playing opposite is Kenny Britt. Kenny Britt had a career year for the Rams last year. He's a solid player, but he's definitely not a wide receiver one. Corey Coleman has that potential, though. So I'm definitely excited to see what he can bring to the table, especially because the Browns, as we talked about with the other game, with the Bears and the Falcons matchup, the Browns should be totally outmatched against the Steelers. Playing from behind, you would think that's a good opportunity for your wide receivers.
And matter of fact, Jamal, same thing kind of applies when you're thinking about teams with the rookie quarterbacks, because you talked about or quarterbacks that aren't first-time starters, whether it's the Bears, whether it's and again Cleveland, Coleman and Britt, and even the running game. So whether it involves any of those guys, or is there a specific player that you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the wide receiver position. There's so many guys like that, coming off not so great years, but have the potential to get right back at it and get back to where they were, or be big time producers this year. One of the guys I'm looking at is Randall Cobb for Green Bay. Definitely last year injury riddled, never really got into a flow, didn't produce much at all last year, but a lot of it was due to injuries, and he's healthy now. And, with Aaron Rodgers, who's definitely comfortable with Cobb over the years, he's been there for a long time. Can he get back into, he won't be the number one receiver there, but can he be 1A in that attack with, behind Jordy Nelson? Can he start putting up big numbers like he used to do a couple of years ago? He's only 29. So I think that first game against Seattle will tell you a lot. And then, there are other guys like even like Eric Decker who leaves the Jets, goes to Tennessee. He has Mariota throwing to him now. That's going to be interesting to see how he fits in there. He definitely has a lot of talent. He has the ability to put up numbers. Will he do that, starting right away? And then another guy, Alshon Jeffrey, obviously a big name, had the PED suspension for Chicago last year. We know he has all kinds of talent. He's on a new team in Philly. He is pretty highly ranked, but I'm still, I'm very interested to see, how it goes there in Philly, at least at the very beginning. Can he put up big numbers from the start with Wentz throwing to him? Obviously, that first game is going to have a tough matchup with Josh Norman, so that's going to be something to look at. But those three players at the wide receiver position, I'm really looking at game one to get a gauge on how they'll be.
All right. And what about players that, because since we do the show every Friday, people, I mean, when's our league free agent pickup day begin?
I think ours is wide open.
We have a one day waiver in this league. Is that right,
we do?
I think there's a waiver in this league.
Oh, so it's just so you have to basically have your picks in and you get your results just in one day. That's it.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, on Monday, you have to put in. It might even be a 2-day delay because of Monday night's game.
Okay.
But I believe the way it'll work is on Tuesday morning, everyone's put in their request, and Tuesday morning it all is distributed based on some sort of order, which is then flipped like a snake.
Okay.
I don't know if it might be opposite of our it might start off opposite of whatever the draft order was.
Okay. So are there any players that are probably more than likely either deep bench guys in most leagues or should be available in most fantasy leagues that you can say, you know what, keep an eye on these guys now, and if they give you any indication of some productivity, something positive this weekend, then you know what? I'm not going to wait anymore, nor should you. Go ahead and think about taking this guy. Jamal?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking again at the wide receiver position. You got a guy like Doxson in Washington, second-year guy at TCU. Had a lot of potential. There's rumblings that Washington wants to get him involved big time in the offense.
Is he healthy?
I'm showing that he's going to play Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah, he returned to practice last week.
Okay.
But he was injured for most of the preseason.
Okay. Right. So he's also an unknown. So I mean, it's risky, but it's worth checking out what he does and being ready to try to grab him if he has a productive day Sunday. A guy like Gabriel in Atlanta, he's a third receiver out there, but he had a pretty good season last year. And in that Atlanta attack with Ryan throwing the ball, all over the place, you can see him taking another step up and maybe becoming the number 2 guy in Atlanta behind Julio. So those are 2 guys that I would look at who are probably not on a roster, especially in a 10 team league, or on your bench in a 12 to 14 team league, that you should probably keep an eye on. And
you, Dan?
Well, I'll tell you, Greg, there are 2 games that if you're really in a situation where you need to get some additional firepower either the running back or the wide receiver position, I think you should be watching because a lot of questions are going to be answered. The first is the Tennessee-Oakland matchup that Jamal already mentioned. On the Tennessee side of the ball, aside from Eric Decker, I'm interested to see how the whole wide receiver core is going to shake out. You also have Corey Davis, obviously a top 5 pick in last year's draft, who was also injured for a lot of the preseason, but I believe is expected to play now. How, between him and Decker and Rashard Matthews and Delaney Walker, I want to see how all those passes are going to get distributed. What's going to be the pecking order? And of course, I want to see how much of a timeshare is. There's been a lot of rumblings that Derrick Henry might be taking over a lot of DeMarco Murray's snaps. Now, Derrick Henry's not available in most leagues, but for those of us who have him on their benches, we're definitely eager to see what happens there. And then, of course, on the other side of the ball, how much of a workhorse is Marshawn Lynch going to be? Or are they going to give the ball to Jalen Richard like they did last year in third down? And likewise, obviously we all know about Crabtree and Cooper, but last year Crabtree outscored Cooper. Is that going to maintain, or is Cooper going to take the wide receiver 1 position that we expect? And they just signed a big deal with Seth Roberts, their number 3 wide receiver. So are they going to try to get him more into the game plan? So those 2 games are interesting to me, but the really fascinating game, as far as waiver pickups goes, is Cincinnati-Baltimore. Because between Cincinnati's running back position and Baltimore's wide receiver position, you just have a lot of question marks. There's obviously 3 guys in the running back position in Cincinnati who have been significant in 2 have been significant in recent history. One is a highly touted rookie in Joe Mixon. Of course, you also have Jeremy Hill, and you also have Gio Bernard, who's a great football player and likely still going to be in the mix, recovering from his ACL surgery. He's still a very young guy. And then for the wide receivers from Baltimore, you got Jeremy Maclin, you got Mike Wallace, you got Bernard. How do you say his name? Bernard. Help me, Jamal.
Perryman.
Rashard Perryman. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. who's going to be the number one guy out there? I mean, I think every guy that I just mentioned, other than Joe Mixon, if they're not available, they were towards the end of someone's draft. You could potentially get them in a trade. And I just think it's fascinating that game, because I feel like there's so many question marks. It's really just been us fantasy experts kind of pontificating on our projections, but we really have no idea how Joe Flacco and Jeremy Maclin are gonna gel. He could have over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, or he could have 500 yards. So I think that game is I'd really keep my eye on that, because I feel like there are a lot of interesting storylines.
Yeah, out of those games, Jamal, and again, we're talking about just fringe players of note here. I would be looking at a guy that I want to see is healthy first. And if I see that he's healthy, and if he looks like in any way, shape, or form that he's catching passes right away, especially if you're in a tight end league like we are, if you don't think you've got a really bona fide top tight end, I'm looking at Max Williams of Baltimore. And then also, I'm looking back at 2 players you didn't mention. One was a rookie that I actually had on my rookie list report that I posted at Ourlads. Again, I don't like dealing too much with rookies, and we'll get into that in a second, unless they are maybe a Corey Davis first-round type guy. But I am interested to see exactly how Tyrod Taylor is going to be implemented into that system as well, because he had a hugely productive career at Western Kentucky and has looked outstanding in the preseason, and is a refined route runner, which is one of the things that's usually really hard to figure out right away in the pro level. He's not that type of guy. And they don't have a lot of depth at receiver. So I think with Corey Davis's injury, I bet you Tyrod Taylor gets probably, and Sharp's out, Douglas is out. I bet you Taylor gets a little bit more reps than we're expecting. And then the last guy, Jamal, is Cordarrelle Patterson.
Right.
Because Patterson, look, okay, the Raiders did what they did with Seth Roberts, but Patterson's better. If they really want to stretch the defense and scare the opposition, Patterson came a long way last year in learning how to play the position. And I think with a quarterback like Carr, who can get the ball deep, unlike Bradford, Patterson's a guy I want to keep an eye on, because you know what? It's going to take one big pass play in week 1 to Cordarrelle Patterson for everybody to pick him up.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. He's a guy that's definitely on my radar and probably on everybody else's. Because remember, in the past couple of years, fantasy football players know he's been a guy who's been, picked up here or there, been on the waiver wire, because he's shown great talent, big play potential, and that was on a team where he didn't, like you said, he didn't have a great quarterback with a big arm like he does now, or a team that was so offensive minded like he does now. It's almost like this is a perfect position for somebody like him. Even the old school Raiders type, rejuvenate someone's career, take a chance on guys who had issues for whatever reason but are just freak athletes. And he's in a system now, and not only that, you can't pay any kind of attention to him because you have Cooper and Crabtree out there. Now you got Marshawn Lynch in the backfield. So yeah, no, I think that's a guy you really have to pay close attention to. And if you don't have a waiver wire and you're like in my 14-team league, you might want to pick him up after that first big reception. Just run to your computer and get him.
Yeah, and then in hope, of course, that he will be a big part of the offense the rest of the way. I remember last year I had Marvin Jones, and what was it? He
started out great.
No, but here's the thing: I had Marvin Jones and didn't really pick him to start him. I picked him to be the fringe guy we're talking about, and I didn't start him in that game. And then I started that game where he had like 35 points against the Packers in the fourth quarter when they were getting killed.
Right.
So I start him for the next 6 weeks. He does nothing. And I just got so pissed at him. I said, just get off my team. I don't even want you around. I don't even want to be influenced in thinking to start you, because if you're going to just be a 1-week guy, then I'm not interested. But that's the thing, again, that you kind of also touched up on with Odell Beckham before, is when you don't start guys and they produce, it hurts you. All right.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah. One last thing, and that is the rookies, players that did not play last night. Give me a rookie or two, Dan, that you think is and it could be an obvious guy, or preferably a guy that maybe not so obvious, that may not even be on a team right now. He's on the bench, or he's a free agent, only because, again, he's a rookie, maybe a third, fourth round pick. Nobody really knows who he is too much. He's a little bit of the preseason, but okay, I can't draft him yet. Any of those guys that if you see a little bit of production this week, that you'd say, you know what, maybe I'll take a chance on this guy.
For me, it's the two Deshaun's. I want to see what's going on with Deshaun Watson and Deshaun Kaiser because these are dynamic players in college. And I think, it's funny. I feel like we tend to have inflated expectations for rookie running backs and deflated expectations for rookie QBs. But I think that these are definitely two guys who could end up being, either one of them could end up in the top 20 or even 15 for quarterbacks for the season. I'm not saying that's a given, but I'm just excited to see, both of them have reasonably good teams around them that have underachieved. Obviously, the Browns have saying underachieved is probably a compliment to the Browns. But what I'm saying is between Britt Coleman, Duke Johnson, Isaiah Crowell, they have weapons on offense. They have a good offensive line, and then obviously we all know that the Texans have talent. So I'm really interested to see what those two rookie quarterbacks are going to do.
All right, Jamal.
Yeah, let me just start off by saying I don't want to be a spoiler, Greg, but shout out to Kareem Hunt. So that's all I got to say. After that, I got a couple of rookies here. One's definitely under the radar. Tariq Cohen out of my alma mater, North Carolina A&T, short scat back for Chicago. Put on a show in preseason and OTAs. Kind of like in the Sproles line of running backs. He'll definitely get chances. Chicago needs all the help they can get. They got to get him involved in the offense. I don't know how fast it happens. It may not be week one, but I'm sure he's going to be in the mix in some way, early, returning punts and kickoffs and that kind of thing. So look out for him, Tariq Cohen for Chicago. And the other guy, he was the top tight end taken in the draft out of Alabama, O.J. Howard. He's not going to play this week, but he's a guy for Tampa Bay in that system with all those weapons that Jameis Winston has. I think they're going to find a way to get him involved. He's a prototypical tight end, big, 6'4", 6'5", long reach, big guy, athletic. There's no way to me that he doesn't become a major part of that offense, barring injury. So those two guys I would look out for.
All right. I mean, if I was going to go at the top of the list of guys that may be available, I would, and I probably, because it's the running back position, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of time. Would probably be Perrine out of Washington, and just because there's just no doubt who's more talented. Kelly was a nice story, but I mean, you're talking about all-time leading rusher at Oklahoma. And this guy he's got, big thighs, who can bounce off players, and it's just a matter of time. So that's a guy that I would, especially I know guys have drafted Kelly, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't draft Kelly for any reason, especially knowing that Perrine could wind up taking the job in week 2. I think that'd be a wasted pick myself. And then I'd also keep an eye on the kid, Breida, from Georgia Southern, who's all of a sudden the number 2 running back on San Francisco. We know that Carlos Hyde gets hurt a lot. We also know that they've moved on from Tim Hightower. Williams, the 4th round draft pick, is on IR. So he's going to be the next guy up. And he's a guy that I would, of course, not draft, but he's a guy that if I notice anything that Carlos Hyde does as far as injury, or especially injury, then I'm not going to hesitate, and I'm going to take that guy. And I actually think San Francisco as a whole is, to tell you that I think they're going to be a little bit better than maybe they're expected to. And Brian Hoyer, if you take a look at him, he's a winning quarterback. He may not be pretty or sexy, but for any quarterback to have a winning record when he was the quarterback at Cleveland, I think that says something about Brian Hoyer.
Right, I have to agree.
I love Brian Hoyer as a backup, and I don't mean as a backup who rides the bench. I love him as a backup who comes in and plays for, 6 to 8 games in a season. I fear that he doesn't have the physical gifts, meaning he's just kind of a small guy. And I just feel like he's going to get banged up, can't last the whole season. But that doesn't mean he's not going to start well. It doesn't mean he's not going to put up good stats while he's in. And I totally agree. I mean, San Francisco's definitely going to be better on the offensive side of the ball, other than just having Kyle Shanahan there, who's pretty much regarded as kind of a offensive wizard. I mean, they were basically the worst offensive team in the history of the NFL last year. So they got to be better. And the Jets will probably take that distinction this year anyway. The worst in the NFL. Now, Greg, I want to ask you, being the all-time leading rusher for Oklahoma, is that a big deal? Have they had good running backs historically?
Yeah, they have, actually. They've had some Heisman winners.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. So it's a few good ones. And he also had a share, of course, carries. That's the thing. I think people forget about him last year because, Joe Mixon was more of the rage last year for the team. And Perrine got kind of, forgotten. And then Mixon became a higher draft pick. I'm not saying that he's not going to be better than Perrine, but, that Washington offense needs playmakers. And Rob Kelly's just not a playmaker. And
there's no reason they can't both be great. Remember
absolutely.
What happened with Cadillac Williams and Ronnie Brown a few years ago, coming out of the same backfield at Auburn, and they were both immediate impact players in the NFL.
And then I would also look for injuries. If anything happens to Sammy Watkins, I would definitely take Cooper Kupp because I think Cooper Kupp is going to have a fantastic career in the NFL. I also need to see what Goff looks like, though, in week 1. And then if anything happens to Adrian Peterson, I jump all over Kamara because I think Kamara is going to get enough touches anyway as a third down back. But if Peterson leaves, then and I know that the Saints want to keep him fresh. And so if anything happens to Peterson, that means Kamara is going to get a lot more touches than he was originally supposed to. And as we saw in the preseason, he's the type of guy that can actually make big plays for you. He averaged over 10 yards a carry in the preseason because he was making big plays almost every time he touched the ball, and that's a big play offense. So, all right, that'll wrap it up. And we'll do this again every Friday, next Friday. Where are you going to be next Friday, Dan? You going to Australia?
Yeah, I was thinking of either Bora Bora or Sri Lanka. No, I'll be back in the Big Apple, my hometown.
All right, sounds good. And so we will touch base with Dan on the East Coast next week, and Jamal will do the same with you. I'll talk to you on Monday, and we certainly hope it's a good conversation after the Jets take on the Bills, because if they in any way, shape, or form, losing a game is one thing, but if they can't cover a 10-point spread against the Bills, I think we're all going to be pretty depressed on Monday.
Yeah, it'll be a good conversation regardless what happens. I have a feeling either it's going to be negative or positive, but it'll be a good conversation.
And again, that show is Jets Confidential Radio on PrimeSportsNetwork.com. Okay, so that'll wrap it up. I want to thank Jamal Murphy and, of course, Dan Weinrich for joining us here on Ourlads Football Network. We'll be back at 4 o'clock with Dan Shanka, Ken Rangolo, and Pro and College Football Talk. And don't forget to join us here every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern for our fantasy football coverage on the Ourlads Football Radio Network. We'll see you next week, and good luck in Week 1.
For tuning in to this PrimeSportsNetwork.com production. Additional PSN programs are available on demand and conveniently located on our website, as well as our official YouTube and iTunes pages under Prime Sports Network. You can also check us out on Twitter at PrimeSN. Once again, thanks for listening to Ourlads Football Radio Network.